My name is Gail Tremblay. I am 64 years old. This past Christmas, in my own dining room, my daughter-in-law poured wine for her mother before anyone else at the table had a glass. She filled it right to the brim, the way you do when you want the room to notice your generosity. Then she came around to my side, set the bottle down, picked up a wooden serving spoon from the dish on the table, pressed it into my right hand, and said, "Mom, would you mind keeping an eye on the gravy? My hands are all full." 9 people watched her do it. My son watched her do it. She knew about my right hand. Everyone who has spent more than one Christmas in this house knows about my right hand. She raised her own glass after that, waited for the table to quiet, and said, "I just want to say, this family has been through a lot, and things are finally moving forward. The settlement money is ours to work with now." I did not say one word. I held that wooden spoon in my left hand instead, and I let the room go on without me. But what I did that night set something in motion that took 8 weeks to finish. And when it finished in a courtroom with a reporter at her machine and a judge who had taken her glasses off. Welcome back to Fierce Mom Stories, where I talk about what happened after the silence. Drop a comment and hit subscribe. I'll be here when you're ready. My husband Barry and I bought the house on Weller Street in Kingston in the spring of 1994. We paid $168,000 for it. Red brick, 2 stories, a screened porch, a garden that needed more work than either of us planned to give it, and a furnace that sounded like it was clearing its throat every time it fired up. Barry was a licensed electrician for the city. I had just been promoted to Senior Trust Administrator at the TD branch in Hamilton, and we were commuting in opposite directions for a while, which is not something I recommend in a marriage, but which we managed for 6 years before he transferred to Kingston. And we both agreed we had earned something quieter. Barry died in January of 2021, a clot in his lung, very fast. We had 31 years, and I am not going to try to put that into words because words always make it smaller than it was. My son Scott is 42. He grew up in Kingston, went to Queens for engineering, and met his wife Brooke during his 2nd year there. She is 37 now and manages a medical imaging clinic in Belleville, about 40 minutes down the 401. She is good at a great many things. The thing she is most practiced at is making a decision sound like a kindness. She started hosting Christmas the year after Barry died. Not at her house in Belleville, at mine. "Your dining room table seats 10, Mom. Ours barely fits 6. I didn't argue. I was still finding my footing through the first winter without him, and if she wanted to take the cooking off my hands, I was willing to let her. That first year, she arrived on the 24th with 2 cooler bags, her own serving platters, and her mother Darlene, who lives in Trenton and whom I had met perhaps 5 times before that day. Darlene sat in Barry's chair, the one at the head of the table, where he had sat every Christmas since 1994. Brooke set the place herself, cheerfully, while Scott carried bags from the car, and I stood in my own kitchen doorway and decided not to say anything, because it was the first Christmas without him, and I was holding myself together with what I had left. The 2nd year, Darlene brought her cousin. The 3rd year, Brooke put out name cards, handwritten, calligraphy, genuinely lovely. "Mines," said Grandma, and sat at the far end of the table, near the kitchen door. Everyone else had their full name. I sat where the card told me to sit. People always assume the silence came from weakness or loneliness or a need to be kept. It was none of those things, exactly. Barry and I tried for 4 years before Scott. We lost 2 pregnancies. When he was born in 1982, he was the whole of something I had not let myself name while I was waiting for it. And I understood, rationally, consciously, as a grown woman, that a child who grows up and builds his own life is the point. I just had not accounted for how it would feel to be quietly moved to the far end of my own table. I have walked with a slight limp since February of 1998. I mention this now because it is the reason for the settlement, and the settlement is the reason for everything else. In February of 1998, I was 36 years old and working in Hamilton. I was visiting a client property, a routine part of a file review. for a trust the bank was administering. When I stepped onto a section of backyard deck that had been taking in water for years, and the boards had gone soft underneath. I went through them hard, and something at L3 and L4 in my lower spine absorbed the impact. There was nerve compression along the right side that traveled down into my arm. My right hand lost most of its grip strength and has never come all the way back. The property owner had insurance. His insurer had lawyers. It took 2 years and mediated settlement talks to resolve. In November of 2000, we reached an agreement. The amount was substantial enough that it came as a structured settlement. Not one check, but a stream of annuity payments funded through a life insurance policy. Spread over 25 years, $2,800 a month, indexed annually, running from January 2001 through December 2025, and then a deferred lump sum of $240,000 payable in January 2026. What all of that looks like when you add it up and print it at the bottom of an annual statement is approximately $1.4 million. I know that number the way I know my own postal code. I have administered structured settlements for other people for most of my working life. I know what that number is, and more to the point, what it is not. It is not a balance. It is not a windfall. It is not money sitting in a vault. It is the total of every payment the contract guarantees across 25 years, added in a straight line. The annuity that funds it cost $380,000 in the year 2000. By this past December, approximately $1,100,000 of it had already been paid out. 24 years of payments, every cent accounted for. Physiotherapy, accessible renovations to the house, the low counter on the left side of the kitchen, the stool bolted to the floor in front of the sink, the ramp to the back door, 2 knee surgeries, medication, a handicap-accessible vehicle, and Paulette, my home care aide, who comes 3 mornings a week and without whom I would manage considerably less well than I do. There is no pot of money. My daughter-in-law stood up at my Christmas table and told 9 people that $1.4 million had become family money to work with. What I could not work out that first week was not why she wanted it. It was how long she had known. Barry died in January 2021. In March, Scott came to the house and said it would make sense for him to be listed as an authorized contact on the annuity account, so that if I was ever back in hospital, he could deal with the insurance company on my behalf. I had been home from knee surgery for 3 weeks. I was on a walker. I was not thinking clearly about much. He filled out the authorization form. I signed it. He mailed it. Clipped behind that form, as it always is, was a copy of the most recent annual statement. $1.4 million, right there on page 2. My daughter-in-law had been looking at that number for almost 4 years. In October, Scott came by on a Tuesday evening with a blue folder. He stood in the kitchen with his jacket still on. He does that when he is not planning to stay, and said that the insurance company needed me to confirm some account details, or the December payment could be delayed. There is no such thing as a routine confirmation that could delay a structured settlement payment. In 24 years, I have never once been asked to verify anything before a payment posted. But I took the folder, sat down at the kitchen table under the lamp, and I read every page. It was a factoring agreement, 31 pages. The buyer was a company called Granite Peak Financial Solutions, registered in Alberta. They were proposing to purchase the last 12 months of my monthly payments, January through December 2025, plus the deferred lump sum of $240,000 due in January 2026. Total payments being sold, $314,000. Purchase price offered, $62,000. 20 cents on the dollar. That was the entire prize. That was what my son was calling family money. Scott stood by the door the whole time I read. He did not sit. He did not take off his jacket. I read for 28 minutes. Then I picked up my pen and I signed. I dated both signature pages, and beside each date, in my own handwriting, I wrote the time. 9:47 p.m. Scott looked at it. "Why are you writing the time?" "Old habit from the bank," I said, and it is the truest thing I said all evening." He took the folder. I heard his truck back out of the driveway. I sat at the kitchen table for a long while with my right hand flat on the wood. I had just done the most useful thing I would do all year. I should tell you what I did for a living, because it is the reason any of this ended the way it did. In 1988, I started as a file clerk at a chartered bank in Hamilton. Filing by hand, organizing by date, learning the shape of documents before I understood what they meant. I took night courses at Mohawk College for 4 years. By 1995, I was a certified trust and estate practitioner, and I had moved into the estates and trust department. For the last 12 years before I retired in 2016, I administered structured settlement accounts. I processed payments. I fielded calls from claimants and from the companies that wanted to purchase their payment rights. I reviewed transfer requests. I sent the same letter perhaps 3,000 times. It began, "We are unable to honor this request." I read the same paragraph of the same contract form so many times I can still say it from memory. The annuity payments described herein may not be sold, assigned, pledged, hypothecated, transferred, or otherwise encumbered by the payee without prior court approval. Any purported transfer is void and of no effect. That language is not there because the insurance company put it in. That language is there because the Federal Income Tax Act requires it. A structured personal injury settlement annuity is excluded from the payee's taxable income for its entire life, but only if the payments cannot be redirected to someone else. Remove that condition, and the Canada Revenue Agency treats the whole stream as income. The payments stay tax-free, or they become somebody else's windfall. They cannot be both. In 28 years, I never once raised my voice at a person on the telephone. A raised voice ends a conversation, and I was usually the one who still needed information. Thursday, December 25th. 9 people, Scott and Brooke, their 2 children, Paige, who is 15, and Leo, who is 10. Darlene, in Barry's chair. Brooke's colleague who I had met once at a work function. A neighbor from 4 doors down who had nowhere else to be. 2 university friends of Scott's visiting from Toronto. And me. Brooke arrived at 9 in the morning with her own tablecloth and her mother's preferred Riesling. By the time people sat down, my kitchen had been hers for 7 hours. "Just rest, Mom. We have everything." She has said that sentence to me every Christmas since 2021. The first time I heard it, I felt genuinely grateful. After that, I understood it differently. The seating put Darlene at the head of the table, in the chair that has been there since 1994. It put me at the far end, near the kitchen door. "My name card," said Grandma, "the same as the year before." Around 4:30, the gravy on the stove needed attention. Brooke was at the far end with her glass. She looked across the length of the table, picked up a wooden serving spoon from the dish in the center, and held it toward me. "Mom, would you mind keeping an eye on the gravy? You're right by the kitchen, and my hands are busy." I want to be careful here. This is the part people misread. My right hand does not grip the way a hand should. The nerve compression from 1998 left me with roughly 30% of normal strength on that side. I cannot hold a pot handle safely. I cannot stir anything heavy on a hot burner. I have not been able to stir anything safely with my right hand since I was 36 years old. Brooke has been in this house for 11 Christmases. She has served me the first plate every year because she told the table that Mom has trouble carrying. She has taken a dish from my hands in this very room and said, in front of company, "Let me get that. It's too heavy for you." She knows exactly what my right hand can and cannot do. She did not hand me that spoon because she needed the gravy stirred. The spoon was wooden, broad handle, smooth shaft, about the length of a forearm. I recognized it. It came from a craft market in Elora in 2006 and has lived in the crock on my counter ever since. I took it with my left hand. A left hand holds a wooden spoon better than she will ever know. I stood up, which takes me a moment since the knee has never been quite right since the second surgery, and I went to the kitchen and stirred the gravy, and I listened to the table behind me. When I came back, Brooke was still standing with her glass raised. A room always settles for a woman holding a glass and a smile. I just want to say that this family has been through a lot, and things are finally moving forward. The settlement money is ours to work with now. We can do something with it. Darlene raised her glass. Brooke's colleague made a noise about what a relief that must be. Paige stopped eating. She looked at her mother, then at her father, then down at her plate. Leo asked if there was pie. I sat near the kitchen door with a wooden spoon in my left hand and said nothing at all. I was not in shock. I had known this was coming since October. I had known what that folder was the moment I saw the company name on the cover page. Factoring companies, the ones that buy structured settlement payments for a fraction of their value, are a business I have dealt with my entire career. Not one of the cases I saw ended the way the client expected. What I felt, sitting at my own table, was not anger. It was something closer to what I used to feel in the trust department when a file came across with dates that did not align. Flat. Certain. The feeling of something being wrong in a way that can be written down. Brooke told me a great deal that afternoon. She thought she was celebrating. The rest of dinner went the way those dinners go. Darlene told the story she always tells, about the flooring business she and her ex-husband had in Trenton, about a contract that collapsed, about losing the house they had put everything into. We asked family for help, she said, looking around the table. $15,000, and we were told no by the people who were supposed to be there. She has told it for 16 years, and she tells it well. Brooke refilled her glass when she finished. Scott talked about the engineering practice. He talked about it twice, which is one more time than a man talks about work when things are actually going well. He did not look at me once between 4 o'clock and 8. At 7:30, Paige carried my plate to the kitchen. She came back and stood beside my chair for a moment without saying anything. Then, "I'll do the dishes, Grandma. You just sit." She is a good kid. I do not know where she came from. They left at 9:15. 3 car doors and the street went quiet. Then I went and got a pen. Here is what my kitchen looks like at 10 o'clock on Christmas night. The counter on the left side is 4 inches lower than standard. Barry had it adjusted when I came home in 1998 and could not lift my arm above the shoulder. The stool, bolted to the floor in front of the sink, is because I can stand for about 8 minutes before the hip begins to protest. The wooden crock on the counter beside the window holds 4 spoons, 3 of them from Alora. I put the Christmas spoon back in the crock, and I did the remaining dishes left-handed at the low counter, and I did not cry. I want to be honest about that because people always expect it. I have cried about many things in my life. I did not cry about a spoon. What I felt was closer to what I used to feel in the trust department when a file was wrong in a way I could prove. At 10:45, I dried my hands and took a legal pad from the drawer beside the refrigerator and wrote 4 short lines on it. Then I looked at them for a while. Then I put the pad in my handbag so I would not lose my nerve by morning. I have been writing letters like that for 28 years. That night was the first time I ever had to write one for myself. The post office on Princess Street opens at 8:30 on Boxing Day. I was there at 8:40 with 3 envelopes. The first letter went to the payment services department at the insurance company that issues my annuity. It revoked, effective immediately, the authorized contact designation I had signed in March 2021, naming my son Scott on the account. It instructed the company to release no information regarding my contract to any individual other than me. The second letter went to payment operations at the same company. It changed my deposit instructions from the joint account Scott and I had opened in 2021 to a new account at a different institution, in my name alone, effective with the January payment. The third letter went to both the annuity issuer and the assignment company that holds my contract. It cited the non-assignment clause from my original settlement agreement and the federal tax provisions that clause exists to satisfy. It directed that any attempt to transfer, factor, or assign any of my payment rights be referred to a court before any action was taken. It asked that any third-party inquiry about my account be reported to me in writing within 5 business days. And it asked for a complete copy of the third-party contact history on my file, by certified mail, return receipt requested. $2.65. 3 certified letters. The clerk at the counter that morning peeled off 3 green cards and pressed them to the backs of the envelopes without looking up. I have been in that post office since 1994, and she has been at that window since before the pandemic. I want to be clear about what I did that morning, because people keep expecting it to be more than it was. I did not hire an investigator. I did not confront anyone. I changed a bank account, revoked a form I should have revoked 3 years ago, and asked a company for a copy of my own file. 3 green cards. Everything else came from what arrived back. Saturday, December 28th. 3 car doors in my driveway at 11 in the morning. When a bank removes a cosigner from a joint account, it notifies the other signer. Scott received that letter at his Belleville address on the 27th. That is the only part of any of this that I had not planned. Scott came in first. Brooke came in behind him and did not take off her coat. Darlene stayed in the front hall with her purse still on her arm. "What did you do?" Scott said. "I updated my payment instructions," I said. Brooke stepped past him into my kitchen and stood between me and the counter with her arms folded. $1.4 million. "Scott dealt with the paperwork in October. You signed it. You're making this harder for everyone." There it was, the whole plan in 2 sentences, with the number to the decimal. I put down my tea. "Scott didn't deal with anything," I said. "I signed it, and I wrote the date, and I wrote the time." No one answered that. I got up, which takes me a moment, and went to the crock on the counter and took out the Elora spoon, the one she had pressed into my hand on Christmas Day, and I folded it into her hands and closed her fingers over it, the way she had placed it in mine. "You take this home," I said. "I've got my own." Then I said the only other thing I said that morning. From now on, anything to do with my contract comes to me in writing. She was on her phone before she reached the end of the driveway. Monday morning, I drove to the office of a lawyer named Joan Marchand, who practices out of a yellow brick building on Ontario Street, 2 blocks from the waterfront. She is 58, has been doing estates and trust litigation in Kingston for 23 years, and her office has a view of the harbor if you lean slightly to the left. $375 an hour, $2,000 retainer. I wrote the check myself, and I want that in the record because someone always asks. I already knew most of what she told me. I made her confirm it anyway, because knowing a principal and having someone who appears in that courthouse confirm it are not the same thing. Under Canadian law and the terms of my original settlement agreement, my annuity payments cannot be sold, assigned, or transferred in any form without a court order, and the application for that order cannot come from me. The buyer, the factoring company, must file an application in the Ontario Superior Court of Justice. They must serve notice on me not less than 20 days before the hearing. The court must find that the transfer is in my best interest, that I received independent financial advice, and that the transfer is consistent with the purposes of the original settlement. Joan took her pen off the page. "You want me to stop it?" "No," I said. "I want it to go all the way. I need there to be a transcript." She sat back in her chair. "Mrs. Tremblay, they're going to put your financial situation on the public court file." "They're going to put theirs in there too," I said. Monday, January 15th. The certified mail came back, 3 green return cards, and with them a thick envelope from the insurance company's payment services department. 12 business days from my request to their response. Confirmation 1. The authorized contact designation had been revoked as of December 26th. Confirmation 2. Payment instructions changed, effective the January deposit. And clipped to the back 3 pages. Third-party contact history. My contract number. My name at the top. 4 entries, printed in columns. March 19, 2021. Inquiry. Annual benefit summary requested. Caller identified as family representative. September 4, 2022. Inquiry. Transferability of payment rights under provincial and federal law. No transfer possible without court approval. Caller advised accordingly. October 8, 2024. Documentation package submitted by third-party funding company. October 9, 2024. Transfer agreement received. I read the second entry 3 times. September 2022. I know exactly where I was in September 2022. I was in hospital in Kingston for 4 days after a cardiac event. A warning, the doctors called it. Not dangerous, but not nothing. And Brooke had been at the house every afternoon, dealing with the mail, saying she just wanted to make sure everything was running while I was away. She called the annuity company that September and asked whether my payments could be assigned to someone else. They told her what they tell everybody. No, not without a court order. She went away and thought about it for 2 more years. That is not a moment of weakness at a dinner table. That is a plan. Nobody invited me to Easter. No argument, no announcement. Brooke simply did not call. I found out from Paige's Instagram that there had been a lamb roast and 12 people at the Belleville house. Easter night, my granddaughter sent me a voice note, just her saying, "I saved you a piece, Grandma. It's in the freezer for you." I ate scrambled eggs at the low counter. My friend Nancy came by the following week with a lemon loaf. Nancy is 66. We started at the same branch in Hamilton in 1988, and she worked the business accounts desk for 30 years. She has a nephew who does renovation work in Belleville and who had recently put in a quote at a commercial property on Pinnacle Street. That is how I learned the rest of it. Scott had signed a 5-year lease on expanded office space for his engineering practice in August 2023, $11,000 a month. He had brought on 2 associates in early 2024, paying their salaries before the new contracts had actually come through. By November, the practice was behind by approximately $68,000. And in early 2022, he and Brooke had spent $120,000 finishing a suite above their garage so that Darlene could move in, while telling me for 2 straight years that they simply did not have the room. If you are listening to this in your own kitchen, I want to ask you one thing. Go look up whose name is listed as an authorized contact on any account where your address is on file. Someone may have been added on a day you were not feeling entirely like yourself. Tell me in the comments if you find one, and subscribe, because the part that finished all of this is still ahead. Tuesday, January 21st. Granite Peak Financial Solutions, Inc. filed its application in the Ontario Superior Court of Justice, Kingston Region. They had no option. Under federal tax rules, a factoring company that purchases structured settlement payments without prior court approval faces an excise consequence that eliminates any margin on the deal. There is no quiet version of this transaction. There is only the courthouse. On Friday, January 24th, a process server knocked on my door on Weller Street at 10:30 in the morning. Inside the envelope, the application, the factoring agreement with my signature on it, a disclosure statement, a notice that I could file a written objection within 15 days, and a hearing date. Thursday, February 27th, 2025, 10 o'clock in the morning, Ontario Superior Court of Justice, Court Street, Kingston. I turned to Schedule A and read what they actually wanted. 12 monthly payments of $2,832, running January through December 2025, plus the deferred lump sum of $240,000 due January 2026. $314,000 in total. Purchase price, $62,000. 20 cents on the dollar. That was the prize. That was what my son sat through Christmas dinner for, and they still called it $1.4 million. I spread every document across the dining room table, the same table, and I worked it the way I worked files for 28 years. You do not start with the argument. You start with the dates. Every page in chronological order. Every signature compared to every other signature. Every date checked against every other date. It took me 35 minutes to find it. The factoring agreement signature page is dated October 9, 2024. The disclosure statement, the document the company is legally required to give me before I sign anything, is also dated October 9, 2024. Both documents carry my signature, both carry the same date, and beside each date, in blue ink in my own handwriting, is the time. 9:47 p.m. Not 2 evenings, 1 evening, in my kitchen, under the lamp, with my son standing by the door in his jacket. The purpose of a disclosure period is so that a person sitting alone at their own kitchen table has time, actual, measurable time, to read a document, consider what it means, and seek advice before committing to anything. I did not receive a disclosure period. I received a folder and a man who did not sit down. I had not broken their deal. I want that stated plainly. I read every page they gave me. I signed my name and I wrote the correct date and I wrote the accurate time. That is all I did. That is the whole of it. There was also, on page 11 of the envelope, a pre-printed waiver of independent financial advice. Blank signature line. I had left it blank in October. I left it blank in January as well. Instead, I called a certified financial planner in Kingston named Celia Okafor, who had never heard of me before that Wednesday morning. She charged me $975. I paid it from my personal checking account, and I have the receipt. Her letter is dated February 3rd. 3 pages, the sentences that matter. That the payments Granite Peak proposed to buy totaled $314,000, falling due between January 2025 and January 2026. That the offered purchase price of $62,000 compared against a present value of approximately $291,000 at the applicable federal discount rate, and that the company's own intake documentation disclosed an origination referral fee of 8%, approximately $4,900, payable to a referral contact listed as B. Renner. I looked that name up. Brooke's maiden name is Renner. She had incorporated a numbered company in Ontario 12 months prior, listed under consulting services. She had referred my file to Granite Peak and stood to collect a fee the moment the court approved the transfer. It was in their own paperwork. Between January and the hearing date, my daughter-in-law called me 11 times in 9 days. I did not answer once. Darlene told a woman at my church that she was worried I was becoming confused and that it was a blessing the children were nearby to keep an eye on things. A man I have known since 1996 stopped me outside the pharmacy on Princess Street and asked, very gently, whether it was true I was making things difficult for the family. Scott sent one text message on the 15th of February at 10:50 at night. "You are hurting this family." I answered every contact the same way, by email, copy saved. I will be in court on February 27th. Anything further, please put it in writing. Joan filed the written objection on January 31st. 2 sentences. The payee objects to this transfer and will appear in person. That is the entirety of my side of that month. If someone has ever told you that you are being difficult because you asked one question about your own paperwork, I would like to hear about it. Put it in the comments. Subscribe, because the hardest part of this is still ahead, though not in the way you might expect. People imagine this is the stage where you build your case. It is not. It is the stage where you stop speaking and let the other side fill the silence. Every time I did not answer the phone, Brooke had to do something with the quiet. She emailed Granite Peak. She called their intake coordinator asking for updates. Every one of those messages went into a file, not mine, theirs. And when a company applies to a court, the company files its documents, all of them. The night before the hearing, I laid out what I was going to wear. A gray wool skirt I have had since 2009. A navy silk blouse, my hair pinned back the way I have worn it since my 30s. Then I took the Elora spoon out of the crock on the counter, and I set it on the kitchen table, and I looked at it for a long time. I have been gripping a wooden dowel for hand therapy since October of 1998. My occupational therapist in Hamilton, her name was Dr. Patel, and she had a braid to her waist, and she had a way of explaining things that made you feel it had been your own idea all along. Placed one in my hand on my second day of rehabilitation and told me to squeeze it 30 times with each hand, morning and evening, every single day. "Not for a wedding and not for a funeral," she said. I said something rude and she wrote it in my chart. We got along well after that. I have done it every day for 26 years. That is why I can still sign my name. That is why I can hold a pen steady enough to write a time in blue ink beside a signature on a document that will matter in a courtroom. Brooke handed me a wooden spoon in front of 9 people to remind me what my place was in that room. She chose the right shape. She had no idea what that shape does in my hands. I put the spoon in the accordion file behind the last divider. At 9:40 the night before the hearing, the phone rang. My son. "Mom," the flat sound his voice gets when he has already lost an argument with himself. "Don't come tomorrow, please. If you walk in there, it is over for us. The law requires me to appear, Scott." Silence. "Brooke said you'd be too proud to show up," he said finally. And there it was. The whole architecture of the last 3 years in 10 words. They had not built their plan around a woman who might fight. They had built it around a woman who would be too ashamed to be seen. "I was 36 years old when I learned to walk again," I said. "I know exactly what those rooms feel like." I hung up first. I have never done that before with my son in my life. February 27th. Courtroom 4C on Court Street. The applicant's lawyer was a man named Mr. Perrin, a careful manner about him, the rolling briefcase everyone has now. A representative from Granite Peak sat behind him, and in the second row, Scott, Brooke, Darlene. They came because Brooke wanted to watch. Also in that room, because a courtroom on a Thursday morning is a public building, a court reporter at her machine, a law student with a spiral notebook, 2 people waiting on an unrelated matter, and half a dozen strangers. Nobody sends invitations to a hearing. That is rather the point of one. Brooke watched me come up the aisle with my cane. She leaned toward Darlene and said something, with her hand in front of her mouth. Darlene smiled at the floor. Nancy set the accordion file on the table and squeezed my arm once and went to sit down. Joan came in at 9:50. "Ready?" "Since October," I said. The Honorable Justice Allard came in at 10 past, sat down and put on her glasses. Her first question was for the other side. "Counsel, this is a third-party application. Confirm that your client filed it and that notice was served not less than 20 days before today." "Yes, Your Honor." "Filed January 21st, served January 24th. And the payee is present." I stood. "Present, Your Honor, Gail Tremblay." "Please be seated." Mr. Perrin said what he was paid to say. He said the transfer would allow me to access resources sooner rather than waiting years. He said I was 64 and the remaining payments were some time away. He said that the payee's family was present in court in support of the arrangement. Brooke nodded from the second row, slowly, deliberately, the way you nod when you think someone is watching. Justice Allard let him finish. Then she turned to me. "Mrs. Tremblay, do you object to this transfer?" "I do, Your Honor." "On what grounds?" I had been thinking about this moment since October. This is what I had decided. 3 documents, Your Honor. The first 2 are theirs. Joan passed up the signature pages. "Your Honor, this is the factoring agreement bearing my signature. Dated October 9th, 2024. This is the disclosure statement, the document the company was required to deliver to me before I signed the agreement. It is also dated October 9th, 2024. I signed both documents in my kitchen on the same evening. I know this because I wrote the time beside my signature on both pages, 9:47 p.m. That is my handwriting." Justice Allard looked at the first page, then the second. "You administered structured settlement accounts at a chartered bank for how long?" 28 years, Your Honor. "And you are aware that the purpose of a disclosure period is to give a payee adequate time to consider and seek advice before signing?" "Yes, Your Honor. I know what a proper disclosure period looks like. I did not receive one. I received a folder." Mr. Perrin asked to confer with his client. The judge said he could confer standing where he was. Your Honor, we would characterize the date issue as a clerical matter that can be addressed with a corrected acknowledgement. Counsel, Justice Allard said, and her voice did not shift at all. This is not a clerical error. It is the entire protection. The disclosure period exists so that a person sitting alone at her kitchen table has time to think before she commits. If you cure it after the fact, there is nothing left of the protection. From the second row, too loud for where she was. You gave her both of them at the same time. Every stranger in that room turned around. Scott did not answer. He was staring at the back of my head. I did not turn around once all morning. The second document is mine, Your Honor. I passed up Celia's letter, a certified financial planner, retained by me, paid by me personally. Her letter is dated February 3rd. The applicant's own file includes a pre-printed waiver of independent financial advice at page 11. I have never signed that waiver. I did not sign it in October, and I have not signed it today. Justice Allard read for perhaps 40 seconds. There is a further disclosure in this letter. Yes, Your Honor. Counsel, your client's intake documentation discloses an origination referral fee of 8%, approximately $4,900, payable to a contact listed as B. Renner. Can you tell me who that is? A pause. A referral contact, Your Honor. Is that person in this courtroom? Brooke stood up. Her voice, when she gave her name, was controlled. And your relationship to the payee? I'm her daughter-in-law. Darlene made a sound. Justice Allard did not look up. The third document, Mrs. Tremblay. It's not mine either, Your Honor. It's page 19 of the applicant's own filing. I purchased a copy at the clerk's window last Monday for $44. Joan passed it up. It was the intake sheet Granite Peak had filed when the application was first submitted. Date: October 8, 2024. Submitted by B. Renner, and at the bottom pasted into the notes field the text of the email that had accompanied the submission. Justice Allard read it aloud. That is what a court does with an exhibit. Once the judge approves, the settlement money is ours. We can save the practice, and Mom can finally downsize and let us take over the house on Weller. The court reporter's hands kept moving. The radiator under the windows ticked once and went still. A room going silent is not dramatic. It is just the absence of sound in a public building on a Thursday morning while 9 people have nothing to say. Then Brooke was on her feet. That was private. That was never meant to be in a court file. You filed it with the court, Justice Allard said, without raising her voice at all. And then my son stood up. He is 42 years old. He looked in that moment much younger. She was in hospital the year I turned 12, he said, and his voice cracked in the middle of it, and then he caught the rest. She missed things. I grew up differently because of it. If she doesn't do this, I lose everything I've built. That is on her. I had been waiting 23 years for the first part of that sentence. He gave me the second part 4 seconds later. Mrs. Tremblay, anything further? One paragraph, Your Honor. From the original settlement agreement, December 14, 2000. I read it. The payments may not be sold, assigned, pledged, hypothecated, transferred, or otherwise encumbered. That language is not there because the insurance company put it there. It is there because the Federal Income Tax Act requires it as a condition of the payments being excluded from my taxable income. Remove the restriction, and the CRA treats the entire stream as income. It was drafted in December of 2000, before my daughter-in-law had finished high school. I set the paper down. This was never family money. It is one person's money, and that person is me. Not because I kept it, because it was purchased with my back and my right hand and 26 years of a wooden dowel every morning before breakfast. I reached behind the last divider of the accordion file and took out the wooden spoon from the Elora market and set it folded on the edge of the table. In October of 1998, an occupational therapist named Dr. Patel told me to grip a wooden dowel every morning and every evening, 30 times in each hand, and never to miss a day for any reason. I have done it for 26 years. It is why I can still hold a pen. It is why I am standing here today and not somewhere smaller. I did not say the other part. I did not have to. The 3 people in the second row already knew what had happened at my Christmas table. Justice Allard looked at the spoon for a moment. Then she took off her glasses. The application is denied. The memorandum of decision was posted to the public court file on Friday, March 7th. Application denied. No finding that the transfer served the PE's best interest. No valid disclosure period established. No waiver of independent advice. It is a public document. Anyone can walk to Court Street and ask for the docket and read every page, including page 19. 2 women from my church quilting group did exactly that in the 3rd week of March. I was never told who mentioned it to them. Granite Peak withdrew on March 12th. Without a court order, the tax consequence on their end would have consumed every cent of their margin. There is no second buyer. There is no workaround. There is the contract and the federal statute, and that is all there is. Scott is still behind on the practice. He surrendered the expanded space in March and is operating out of a smaller rental on Montreal Street. He is a good engineer. He always has been. That was never the problem. Brooks' referral arrangement dissolved when the denied application was logged in the industry database. A denied application with a judge's findings in it follows a person. The next company that sees a name reads the last file first. Darlene moved back to Trenton in April. On the 1st of January 2026, 6 weeks before any of that, $2,832 posted to a new account at a different bank, in my name alone, on time, the same way it has posted on the 1st of January every year since 2001. Nobody called to ask about it. That was the part I had not expected. Not the courtroom. The telephone that simply stopped ringing the moment there was nothing left in me to unlock. In March, I wrote my son a letter. Regular post, 1 stamp, no return receipt, because I no longer needed proof of anything. 3 paragraphs. The first apologized for the months I was away, when he was 11 and 12. I have meant that apology for 30 years. I had never put it somewhere it would last, and it turns out a letter is the only place an apology actually counts. The second said that I was not sorry for signing my name with the correct date and the accurate time, and that I would do the same again on any evening of any year. The third was the boundary, and I kept it short, because a boundary gets weaker the more words you put around it. Anything concerning my contract comes to me in writing. Anything at all. I also filed a standing instruction with the annuity company. No information released to any third party. Any inquiry about transfer or assignment reported to me in writing within 5 business days. My granddaughter came out on the first Saturday in April. She is 15 years old. She took the bus from Belleville and walked the last 4 blocks from the corner because the route doesn't go all the way down Weller. She texted from the porch to say she was there, not sure if I was awake. We made soup. We sat at the kitchen table until it was dark outside. She asked me about the case, not the way someone asks when they want gossip, but the way someone asks when they genuinely want to understand how something works. I showed her the accordion file. I explained, as plainly as I could, what a structured settlement is and why the payments cannot be redirected, and what a judge does when she sees 2 documents with the same timestamp and a handwritten time in blue ink. Paige said, "So you knew the whole time, from October." "From the first page of the folder," I said. She sat with that for a while. Before she left, she noticed the Allura spoon on the counter, set apart from the others. She asked why it was out. I told her about Dr. Patel and the dowel and the 26 years of morning exercises at this table, before the kettle, before anything else. She picked the spoon up and turned it over in her hands and set it back down. "She handed you exactly the wrong thing," Paige said. "She handed me exactly the right shape," I said. "She just didn't know what that shape has been doing in my hands since before she was born." Paige laughed. That was exactly the right response. People look at a 64-year-old woman with a cane and a right hand that doesn't fully close, and they make assumptions that are comfortable for them. They are welcome to keep making them. What has actually held me upright for 26 years was never the cane, and was never the settlement either. It was the plain and unremarkable habit, pressed into every morning, carved into the bones of every document I ever handled, of reading every word before I sign it, writing down the true time, and understanding that a woman who moves carefully is not the same thing as a woman who doesn't see where she's going.